Imagine, imagine being 10 years old. You know, you're sitting at your kitchen table, just staring at a piece of loose leaf paper.
Right, just struggling your way through long division or something.
Exactly. Your biggest concern is literally just whether you'll get to play outside before the streetlights come on. And then the phone rings.
And it's not your friend from down the street?
No. On the other end of the line is, well, the single most famous human being on the planet calling to ask if you want to hang out.
It really sounds like the premise of some surrealist indie film, doesn't it?
It totally does. But today, for our deep dive, we are unpacking a paradox that challenges basically everything we think we know about global fame, visibility, and human connection.
Because we all operate under this collective assumption, right?
Mm.
We assume that hypervisibility automatically equals hyperconnection.
Like if millions of people know your name, you must be surrounded by friends.
Exactly. We assume that if everyone buys your records or watches your movies, you somehow have access to this exclusive, elevated plane of existence where you were just universally understood.
But when you actually dissect the lived experiences of people who reach that unimaginable level of cultural saturation,
Especially when they are thrust into it as children.
right, especially as kids, that entire narrative just disintegrates. You aren't looking at a landscape of endless connection at all.
No, you're looking at a sensory deprivation tank.
That's such a good way to put it. The visibility is so blinding that it actually cuts you off from the rest of the world.
Leaving you entirely alone with your own echo, which
Hmm.
is the core of our exploration today. We are looking at the collision of two completely unparalleled lives.
Michael Jackson, a pop icon who literally could not walk down a public street anywhere on the globe without inciting a riot.
And Macaulay Culkin, the most famous child actor in the history of cinema.
And the wild thing is, the foundation of their friendship wasn't built on mutual awe or like industry networking.
Not at all. It was built on the profound relief of finally finding someone who fundamentally did not care about the other's fame.
It's fascinating. So our goal for you listening to this deep dive is to really journey through this vastly misunderstood dynamic.
We're going to examine the crushing architectural weight of childhood fame.
Yes. And as we navigate this, we are also going to look at the linguistic tools required to survive it.
Which is a really unique angle we have from our sources today.
It is. We are going to explore how shifting from an intermediate surface level way of speaking, what linguists call the B2 level, to an advanced conceptual C2 level of English isn't just about, sounding smart.
Right. It is the essential survival mechanism required to articulate complex trauma and defend your own reality against the speculation of millions.
Because the media apparatus thrives on the sensational.
It wants caricatures, it wants heroes and villains.
But the reality buried in the source material we are examining today is much quieter and arguably much more profound.
It is a study of the human need to be seen as a person rather than an idol. And articulating that nuance requires a very specific type of linguistic architecture.
Let's start with the collision itself, because the timeline here is super crucial. We have to rewind to late 1990 and early 1991.
Right, so Home Alone hasn't just premiered, it has fundamentally altered the cultural landscape.
It's an absolute earthquake. Macaulay Culkin goes from being a working child actor to the most recognizable face on the planet practically overnight.
And the documentation reveals that Michael Jackson saw the film during the 1990 Christmas season.
And shortly after, Jackson asks his housekeeper, Norma, to track down Culkin's family and invite him to his ranch.
Though it's important context that this telephone call wasn't the absolute first time they occupy the same physical space.
Oh, right. The sources indicate a prior, incredibly brief encounter before the Home Alone phenomenon took over the world.
Yes, the Lincoln Center meeting. Culkin was performing as Fritz in The Nutcracker.
This is like the Uncle Buck era of his career, right?
Exactly. He's known, but he's in a global phenomenon yet. Jackson came backstage, recognized him from the movie, they had a passing exchange, and that was it.
Just a fleeting backstage greeting. But the actual catalyst for their bond happens after the release of Home Alone. And the way Culkin frames this intervention is critical.
He doesn't describe it as a calculated public relations maneuver.
No, he says Jackson called him out of the blue.
Out of the blue. That phrase perfectly captures the jarring nature of the event.
Let's unpack that for a second, because we use it all the time, but what does it really convey?
Well, when something happens out of the blue, it arrives without any precedent, warning, or logical buildup. It defies the normal sequence of expectations.
Okay, let's unpack this, because looking at this objectively through a modern lens, it is completely bizarre.
It definitely sounds strange on paper.
Right. Imagine you're a kid doing your math homework and the president calls you to hang out. It's absurd. I think the public's immediate cynical reaction is suspicion.
Which is a natural reflex given modern contexts.
So I have to ask, how do the sources unpack the psychology of this so we can understand Jackson's actual motivation without just projecting our modern anxieties onto the situation? Why make that call out of the blue?
It is a vital question, and it really comes down to the mechanics of psychological mirroring.
Okay, what do you mean by that?
Well, what's fascinating here is that when Michael Jackson looked at the cultural hysteria surrounding Macaulay Culkin in the winter of 1990, he was not looking at a contemporary peer.
Right.
He was looking at a ghost from his own past.
Oh, wow.
Jackson saw a child standing directly in the path of the exact same traumatic, all-consuming hurricane of fame that he had been forced into as the young frontman of the Jackson 5.
He knew exactly what the pressure was going to do to him.
Precisely. Jackson understood the highly specific mechanics of what was about to happen to Culkin.
Because he lived it.
Yes. He knew how the adults in Culkin's orbit would suddenly mutate, how their eyes would change from seeing a child to seeing a commodity.
That is so dark, but so true.
He knew the profound physical isolation that comes when you can no longer step outside your front door without a security detail.
So he reached out.
He reached out of the blue because he recognized a shared catastrophe. He was offering a lifeline, a buffer. He identified with Culkin's impending reality in a way literally no one else on Earth could.
That concept of identifying with someone is so central here. It's not just sympathy, is it?
No, sympathy is completely different.
Right, because sympathy is looking at someone in a cage and feeling bad for them. Identifying with someone means you know exactly what the bars of the cage feel like because you've lived inside it.
That's a perfect analogy.
And the cage they were both trapped in is described in the sources as white-hot attention.
The linguistic choice of white-hot there is incredibly deliberate and revealing.
Yeah, I stopped when I read that, because it's not just a lot of attention.
Exactly. If you think about the physical properties of heat, red hot implies a burn, a danger. But white hot is the absolute maximum temperature before a physical object entirely disintegrates.
It incinerates everything it touches. It's like being an ant under a giant magnifying glass where everyone is watching your every move.
And it obliterates nuance. When applied to public attention, white hot means a level of scrutiny so intense that it burns away a person's privacy
It burns away their childhood.
and their fundamental right to simply exist as a developing human. It is an environment where every movement, every mistake, and every word is magnified and consumed by millions of strangers.
Culkin's own description of existing inside this blast furnace it's honestly haunting.
He talks about walking the halls of his Catholic school.
Yes. He is physically surrounded by hundreds of other children his exact age. He is sitting in the same desks, eating in the same cafeteria, wearing the same uniform.
But he knows that he felt utterly, completely isolated.
He realized that not a single person in that building had even the slightest comprehension of what his life had become.
Which is why he calls himself a peerless person.
Let's look at that word, peerless.
We really must dissect what peerless actually means in the context of childhood development.
Because normally we use the word as a compliment, don't we?
We do. We talk about an athlete with peerless skill, meaning unmatched or without equal.
Right, the greatest of all time.
But when a 10-year-old realizes they are peerless, it is a developmental tragedy.
Wow. Yeah, I never thought of it that way.
A peer is someone who reflects your reality back to you, someone who helps you calibrate what is normal.
So to be peerless
Means to be entirely unmoored. There is no one to look at and say, is this happening to you too?
until the phone rings out of the blue.
Yes, because Michael Jackson was the only person alive who could look at Macaulay Culkin and say, I know exactly what is happening to you, and you are not crazy.
Which brings us to a really profound philosophical distinction made in our source material.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it's about the fundamental, unbridgeable chasm between admiration and understanding.
This distinction is what unlocks the entire story for me.
How so?
Because from the outside, you look at someone with millions of screaming fans, people literally fainting at the sight of them, and you think, how can they possibly be lonely?
Because admiration is inherently distancing.
Explain that.
When the public admires you, they elevate you. They place you on a pedestal, turning you into a symbol, a brand, or even a deity.
Right.
But a symbol doesn't have bad days. A brand doesn't cry. By elevating you, Admiration strips away your humanity.
Whereas understanding.
Understanding, conversely, is an act of grounding. It pulls you down from the pedestal, looks you in the eye, and acknowledges your flaws, your fears, and your reality.
That makes so much sense.
Michael Jackson was arguably the most admired man in human history. Entire stadiums would weep just seeing him stand perfectly still.
Literally just standing there.
And yet he was agonizingly lonely, because admiration cannot keep you warm.
So because Jackson was starved for understanding rather than admiration, their actual time together looked absolutely nothing like what the tabloids imagined.
Not at all.
I mean, here's where it gets really interesting. You have the king of pop and the biggest movie star in the world. And what do?
They don't go to Hollywood galas.
They don't do joint press conferences. They play video games.
The normalcy of it is staggering.
It's so funny. Culkin's reaction to Jackson's celebrity status is hilarious, but also deeply profound.
He was completely unfazed.
He basically looks at Jackson and says, okay, cool, you're just that guy who sings songs. I sing songs in school too. That's great.
The sources describe Culkin as being thoroughly unimpressed by famous people.
Thoroughly unimpressed. And you can see why. When you are the breadwinner for your entire family at age 10, the mystique of Hollywood is completely dead to you.
Exactly. To be thoroughly unimpressed means you refuse to participate in the performance of awe.
You're just over it.
You are completely indifferent to the hierarchy of status. And the great irony here is that this indifference is precisely what made Culkin so valuable to Jackson.
Why?
If Culkin had treated him like the king of pop, the relationship would have died instantly.
Right. Jackson loved him because Culkin treated him like an annoying older brother.
He wouldn't let him get away with anything.
Culkin is on record saying he would call Jackson a fathead and a jerk. He wouldn't let Jackson win at video games. They would just hang out at amusement parks, watch movies, and do the most spectacularly ordinary things.
There's an incredible anecdote in the sources about them doing prank calls together.
Oh, the prank calls. Yes. Jackson apparently loved prank calling people.
It was a favorite hobby of his.
And Culkin remembers sitting there as Jackson dials a local mattress store, waits for them to answer, and just says, "Hi, do you have any mattresses in your mattress store?"
And then just hangs up laughing.
It's so stupid, but so funny.
But it is the ultimate manifestation of the mundane.
Let's define mundane for a second.
The mundane refers to the ordinary, the tedious, the day-to-day realities that non-famous people find boring.
Going to the grocery store, making a phone call.
Exactly. But for a man whose entire existence since childhood was a highly choreographed, high-stakes spectacle,
A prank call to a mattress store represents... what?
a fleeting moment of pure, unadulterated freedom.
Wow. But they weren't just sitting quietly either. They were actively causing chaos.
Culkin was very good at causing chaos.
He was. Culkin tells this story about a vacation they took to Bermuda. And Jackson, in the sources, actually points out that Culkin was ingenious when it came to inventing trouble.
Ingenious implies a high level of cleverness and inventive problem-solving.
He wasn't just throwing tantrums, he was architecting elaborate pranks.
He was a mastermind.
The mastermind at work. So they're in this hotel in Bermuda, and Culkin, the 10-year-old ingenious mastermind, somehow convinces Michael Jackson, a man whose hands are insured for millions of dollars, to sit in a hotel room and manually tie off and autograph water balloons.
Just picture that for a second.
Jackson is running a water balloon assembly line, and Culkin is hurling these autographed balloons off the balcony at the paparazzi, and fans gathered below.
And the fans are screaming, fighting over the broken balloon pieces.
Right. And Culkin is just standing on the balcony, cracking up, jokingly declaring himself the Michael Jordan of water balloon fights.
It is a deeply comedic visual, but it is layered over a very dark psychological truth.
How so?
We have to look at why Jackson was willing to sit on the floor and tie balloons for a child. The sources provide a quote from Jackson that is genuinely devastating.
I know the one you mean.
He said, "I haven't been around hardly any adults that haven't ended up wanting something from me."
It just makes your stomach drop.
It forces you to realize that for Jackson, the adult world was purely transactional.
Every time an adult smiled at him, there was a secondary motive.
Always. They wanted a record deal, an endorsement, a loan, a photo op, or just a sliver of his influence to elevate their own status.
They viewed him as a resource to be mined.
Exactly. Children, however, had not yet learned how to monetize him.
Wow.
To a young Macaulay Culkin, Michael Jackson had no transactional value. He was just a willing accomplice for a water balloon fight.
So children provided the only psychological sanctuary where Jackson felt safe from being consumed.
Yes, they were the only ones who didn't want a piece of him.
But that sanctuary, that insulated bubble of prank calls and video games, could not withstand the crushing weight of the outside world forever.
No, it couldn't.
Eventually, the reality of the adult legal system and the global media apparatus dragged their dynamic out of the living room and into the courtroom.
Which brings us to the most complex and heavily scrutinized crucible of their friendship.
Yes, it does.
And before we unpack the mechanics of this era, we must establish very strict parameters for what we are and are not doing here.
Absolutely. We need to be very clear with you listening. We are not here to litigate the past. We are taking absolutely no sides regarding the broader allegations, investigations, or legal battles that surrounded Michael Jackson.
We are not validating or invalidating those claims.
Our mandate for this deep dive is strictly to analyze Macaulay Culkin's specific perspective, his lived experience, and the precise linguistic architecture he used to defend his reality.
Exactly as it is presented in our source material. We are examining the anatomy of a media firestorm and how one individual navigated it.
So let's trace the mechanics of this timeline. The first major wave of allegations against Jackson materializes in 1993.
Right, and at this point, Culkin is roughly 13 years old.
The sources reveal that Culkin desperately wanted to speak out publicly to defend Jackson right then and there.
But he didn't.
No, he didn't, because his father absolutely forbade it.
This requires us to look at the power dynamics of child stardom. We have to ask why a 13-year-old who is famous enough to command millions of dollars per film has no voice.
Why couldn't he just call a press conference?
Because he is entirely legally and financially captive. His parents are his managers.
Right, they control everything.
Their primary objective, often driven by immense financial incentive, is to protect the viability of the Macaulay Culkin brand.
So injecting their primary asset into a highly radioactive global scandal threatens that revenue stream.
Exactly. So the child's agency is completely erased. He is silenced to protect the business.
But time strips away that parental control.
It does.
Fast forward to the 2005 trial, and the landscape has completely shifted. Culkin is now an adult. He has his own agency.
And the sources describe his arrival at the courthouse in Santa Maria as being completely devoid of fanfare.
Devoid of fanfare. That's an interesting phrase.
The absence of fanfare is a deliberate choice here. Fanfare implies a spectacle. Trumpets, red carpets, orchestrated public relations maneuvering.
Like arriving with an entourage of publicists.
Right. By arriving without it, Culkin is visually signaling that he is not there to participate in the media circus.
He is there to execute a solemn duty to his own truth.
Precisely.
So he takes the stand, and the documentation notes that he spoke with a remarkably clear, unwavering voice.
He stated definitively that Jackson never touched him inappropriately.
But the prosecution isn't going to just nod and let him walk away. The text details that Culkin was subjected to a highly aggressive cross-examination by the prosecutor, Ron Zonin.
Let's examine the mechanics of an aggressive cross-examination, because it's not just asking hard questions.
What is the goal, then?
The objective of the opposing counsel is not necessarily to uncover truth, but to dismantle credibility.
Ah.
An aggressive cross-examination utilizes intense, rapid-fire, and often deliberately confusing questioning to rattle the witness, induce anxiety, and trick them into contradicting themselves.
And Zonin goes right for the pressure point. He focuses heavily on the fact that Culkin had shared a bed with Jackson.
Which Culkin testifies was completely innocent, just two people falling asleep watching movies.
Right. So Zonin pivots, trying to trap Culkin by suggesting that perhaps Jackson did something while Culkin was unconscious.
A classic tactic.
Zonin asks, so as far as you know, you were never molested while you were awake?
A highly loaded question.
And Culkin doesn't flinch. He shoots back immediately. As far as I know, I was never molested by Michael Jackson.
It is a masterclass in holding a boundary.
He didn't even pause.
The prosecutor attempts to introduce a hypothetical loophole, the idea of being unconscious. Culkin refuses to let the prosecutor's hypothetical override his own empirical reality. He shuts the loophole instantly.
Culkin addresses this exact issue later in the sources, and you can practically hear the exhaustion and frustration in his voice regarding how the public deliberately misinterprets his reality.
The bedroom situation, right?
Yes. He says that when the public hears the phrase, slept in the same bedroom, they map their own reality onto it.
They picture a cramped 10 by 10 suburban bedroom.
Exactly. And Culkin points out the absurdity of this. He says, we are talking about Michael Jackson's bedroom. It was 2 stories high.
It had 3 separate bathrooms.
It was massive. He explains that you'd be watching a movie, you'd get tired, you'd just plop down on one side of this massive space and you'd just go to sleep.
It was, in his own words, completely mundane.
And his refusal to allow the public to rewrite his memories extends far beyond the courtroom.
The sources highlight a fascinating encounter years later on an airplane with the actor James Franco.
Oh man, this interaction is incredible. So this happens after the release of the Finding Neverland documentary, which obviously reignited the global firestorm of public discourse.
Everyone was talking about it again.
Franco runs into Culkin on a plane and asks him what he thought about the documentary. And Culkin doesn't give a PR-approved diplomatic answer.
No, he doesn't.
He looks Franco dead in the eye and says, "Do you want to talk about your dead friend?"
It is a brutally efficient conversational boundary.
It stops Franco completely in his tracks.
As it should.
But it makes me wonder, how does someone maintain that level of steadfast certainty?
What do you mean?
Well, you have a global media apparatus, legal teams, documentaries, and even your own peers in Hollywood constantly telling you that your reality is wrong. Everyone in the world is speculating about what happened to you.
The pressure must be unimaginable.
Right. How do you not eventually crack and start doubting your own memories?
The answer lies in the psychological wall Culkin built between 2 distinct concepts: speculating versus circumstance.
Break those down for me.
When we speculate, we are forming theories based on fragmented information, bias, and projection.
Like trying to put together a puzzle without all the pieces.
Exactly. The media, the public, the prosecutors, they were entirely in the realm of speculation. But Culkin was operating purely within his own circumstance.
Okay, and a circumstance is?
The circumstance is a concrete, verifiable condition connected to a lived event.
He lived the circumstance. They just read the headlines.
Exactly. Culkin realized that public speculation is infinite and uncontrollable. But his circumstance was finite and true.
He says in the sources, "I never saw anything. He never did anything."
He recognized that the world's demand for a scandalous narrative did not obligate him to supply one.
He protected his sanity by refusing to let external speculation contaminate his internal circumstance.
This brings up a really fascinating transition point from our source material about how we articulate this kind of intense, boundary-defending reality.
Right, moving into the linguistic side of things.
Yes. When Culkin was on the witness stand, or shutting down James Franco, he wasn't just using basic surface-level language. He was employing highly advanced linguistic frameworks.
And our sources provide this incredible lens to analyze this, comparing how an intermediate English learner at the B2 level might express these emotional concepts versus an advanced C2 level speaker.
This is where the mechanics of language intersect with the mechanics of survival.
I love how you phrase that.
Think about it. If you only possess B2 level language skills, you are functionally limited to describing the surface of an event.
You can recount actions.
Right. Who went where, who did what, whether it was good or bad.
But to survive a hostile cross-examination?
And to process the invisible weight of global scrutiny, you need C2 level conceptual mastery.
Which is more than just big words.
C2 language isn't about memorizing a thesaurus at all. It is about the structural ability to analyze systems, identify emotional undercurrents, and name abstract psychological states.
Let's actually test this framework using the exact prompts from the sources. It really illustrates how vital language is for processing reality.
Let's do it.
Okay, topic 1 asks the core question of this entire deep dive. Does fame make people happier?
Okay.
If I play the role of the B2 speaker, my response based on the text is, I don't think fame always makes people happier. Famous people have money and opportunities, but they also have many problems. They can't have a normal life, and many people want something from them.
From a purely mechanical standpoint, that is a flawless B2 response.
The grammar is right, the vocabulary works.
Yes, the grammar is correct, the logic tracks. But notice the architecture of the thought. It is entirely binary and observational.
Fame equals money, but fame also equals problems.
Exactly. Now, let's elevate that to the C2 response from the text. I think fame is often romanticized. While it can provide financial security and open doors, it also comes with intense public scrutiny and a significant loss of privacy. In many cases, fame amplifies existing problems rather than solving them.
The difference in emotional intelligence is staggering.
Let's dissect why. The C2 speaker doesn't just observe the world. They analyze society's complicity in it.
By using the word romanticized.
Right. By using the word romanticized, the speaker acknowledges that the public actively constructs a fantasy around fame.
Instead of the basic, can't have a normal life, the C2 speaker identifies the specific mechanism of harm, intense public scrutiny.
And the most profound leap is the final clause. Fame amplifies existing problems.
That is a deep psychological insight.
It recognizes that fame is not a solution, it is a magnifying glass.
It totally shifts the listener's empathy. Let's look at topic 2, which zeroes in on the Jackson-Culkin dynamic, meeting someone who understands you.
Go ahead with the B2 response.
My B2 answer. One of my close friends understands me very well. I can talk to him about my problems, and he usually knows how I feel without me explaining everything.
Again, functional and clear. But listen to how the C2 framework re-architects that same feeling.
Let's hear it.
One of the most valuable relationships in my life is with someone who has gone through experiences similar to mine. There's a certain comfort in speaking with someone who genuinely understands your challenges without needing lengthy explanations. That kind of connection creates a strong sense of trust and belonging.
Wow. The jump from he knows how I feel to creates a strong sense of trust and belonging changes everything.
It names the outcome.
It really does.
Exactly. The B2 speaker describes the action skipping the explanation. The C2 speaker identifies the psychological result of that action belonging.
Belonging. For a child star who described himself as peerless and isolated, finding someone who didn't require lengthy explanation wasn't just convenient.
No, it was the literal creation of belonging. It was a lifeline.
Which brings us perfectly to the advanced follow-up discussion from the sources regarding the invisible weight of success.
This is a crucial concept.
The prompt asks to what extent society misunderstands the emotional cost of success. Let's use our C2 language tools to really dig into this. Why is the public so incredibly blind to the suffering of successful people?
I would argue that society is conditioned to equate visibility with invulnerability.
That's a great way to say it.
We focus entirely on the tangible metrics of success. The box office numbers, the platinum records, the massive estates.
The stuff we can see.
And we operate under the delusion that wealth acts as an impenetrable shield against psychological distress. We see the armor, but we completely ignore the emotional cost of wearing it.
And the irony is that the very machinery required to maintain that success, the relentless touring, the invasive press, the constant performative existence,
Yes.
is the exact machinery that generates the isolation. It is an invisible weight.
It truly is.
You carry it everywhere, it is crushing your spine, but because it doesn't show up on a bank statement, nobody else believes it exists.
And because society cannot see the invisible weight, they cannot empathize with it. This is precisely why shared experiences, rather than shared interests, become the bedrock of survival for people in these environments.
Oh, absolutely. If you and I share an interest, let's say we both love 1980s pop music, we can have a great conversation.
Sure, we can debate albums.
But if we share an experience, if we both survive the white-hot blast furnace of childhood fame, we don't just share a conversation. We share a trauma language. We share a survival strategy.
You share a foundational trust.
Yeah.
You don't have to spend energy defending your reality to that person because they already know it's true.
And it was that profound, unspoken trust that defined the final chapters of the relationship between Macaulay Culkin and Michael Jackson.
That legacy of trust manifested in ways that were both deeply intimate and highly publicized.
The sources note that as Jackson began having his own children, Paris, Prince, and Blanket, he asked Culkin to step into the role of godfather.
And true to the deeply mundane nature of their friendship, Jackson didn't orchestrate a grand formal ceremony to ask him.
Typical Jackson-Culkin dynamic.
Culkin recalls Jackson simply calling him up casually and saying, "Yeah, you want to be my son's godfather?"
It's just over the phone.
Yes. Culkin accepted it as a normal request between two friends.
Yeah.
But because of the gravitational pull of Jackson's fame, a private, casual phone call instantly became front-page news across the globe.
The media tried to spin it as something weird or calculated, entirely missing the fact that Jackson was simply asking the one person he trusted implicitly to look out for his kids.
And Culkin honored that trust fiercely.
He really did. He showed up for Jackson during the high points, like attending Jackson's 30th anniversary All-Star Salute in 2001.
And tragically, he showed up for the end.
Yeah. In 2009, Culkin attended Jackson's funeral.
The sources describe his presence there, arriving solemnly to sit among a very small, fiercely loyal inner circle that included people like Elizabeth Taylor and Quincy Jones.
The use of the word solemnly here is deeply evocative.
Solemnity implies a quiet, dignified seriousness. While the entire planet was consumed by the chaotic fanfare of Jackson's death, the endless news cycles, the tributes, the speculation, Culkin existed inside a solemn, private grief.
When Culkin later reflected on the entirety of the media circus, the trials, and the sheer chaos that surrounded Jackson's life, he summarized the public spectacle as unfortunate.
He acknowledged the tragedy of the noise.
But when he spoke about the actual bond they shared behind closed doors, he called it profound.
Profound meaning reaching to the very depths of one's being. It is important to note that their friendship wasn't necessarily extensive in its later years.
They weren't hanging out every weekend.
Right, they weren't seeing each other every single day for decades, but the emotional resonance was peerless.
It didn't need to be daily to be profound.
Exactly.
So when we pull all of these threads together, the shared trauma, the prank calls, the courtroom defense, the linguistic architecture of survival, what does this source material actually teach us?
A big question.
It leaves us with a beautifully simple, almost startling realization. When Macaulay Culkin, the man who arguably knew him best, remembers Michael Jackson, he does not talk about the moonwalk.
He does not talk about the best-selling album of all time.
He does not talk about the king of pop.
He talks about a guy who liked to order fake mattresses over the phone.
He talks about filling up water balloons in a hotel room in Bermuda. He talks about sitting on a couch, completely unimpressed, just letting another human being exist without asking them for a favor.
The ultimate lesson buried in this deep dive is that at the end of our lives, people do not remember us for our resumes.
They do not remember the scale of our visibility.
They remember how safe we made them feel.
Which brings us to a critical, inward-facing question for you to consider as you listen.
We operate within a society that aggressively incentivizes visibility. We are told to build our networks, curate our personal brands, and accumulate the admiration of as many people as possible.
It's exhausting.
But as we've seen, admiration creates a pedestal, and pedestals are agonizingly lonely.
They elevate you just enough so that nobody can reach you.
Precisely. So the question we must ask ourselves is, who in our lives truly sees us? Not the version of us that achieves things at work, not the curated version we present online, but the deeply flawed, mundane reality of who we are.
And conversely, who are we providing that sanctuary for?
At the end of the day, the people we love do not need us to be spectacular.
They don't need us to be impressive.
They need us to be a safe place where they can drop the armor.
They need us to be thoroughly unimpressed by the performance and fiercely protective of the person.
Well said.
We have covered an immense landscape today. We started with a random phone call out of the blue that caused two parallel universes to collide.
We deconstructed the white-hot blast furnace of child fame, the transactional nature of the adult world, and the crucial distinction between public speculation and lived circumstance.
And we explored how mastering the C2 level language of our own trauma is what allows us to defend our reality and find true belonging.
It has been a complex journey, from the hyper-sensational to the quietly, profoundly human. And as you step away from this discussion, I want to leave you with one final thought to mull over.
Go for it.
In a culture that constantly demands that you prove your worth through visibility and achievement, what if the most radical, lasting impact you can ever have on another human being is simply proving to them that they aren't alone in the dark?
That is exactly where we need to leave it. Thank you for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning the surface narrative. Keep seeking true understanding over mere admiration, and we will catch you next time.